This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Mission Life, Lifestyle for Environment. The participants are Mukul Sanwal, environmentalist, and Sanjay Jha, journalist.
Weeks ahead of COP27 meeting, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today launched Lifestyle for Environment, Mission Life at the Statue of Unity in Gujarat's Kevadia in the presence of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Mission Life aims to be India's signature initiative at the United Nations to nudge individual and collective actions to protect and preserve the environment. Prime Minister Modi said there's a need to make sustainable choices. How do you see this development and this initiative?
I think the initiative is long overdue because so far we have been looking at climate change, as the Prime Minister said, as a policy issue, as something that the governments and international community will do, or as something that technology will take care of. But then we found that emissions keep increasing. The date when there will be net zero emissions keeps getting postponed, and then they will change on the ground. Now, what the Prime Minister has really said is 5 things. He has picked on the key issue in climate change, that it is caused by anthropogenic emissions. It is the emissions caused by individual human beings. So what he has said is that let us not look at somebody else to take the action. Let us take it as a community or an individual issue. Now, why is this important? Because ultimately, as people shift to urban areas from rural areas, in the West, 80% of the population is living in cities. We are between the 40s and 50s. As people shift to cities, their lifestyle becomes important. Consumption emissions become more important than production emissions. Most of the population living in cities, their needs for electricity, their needs for transportation, and most of all, their need for cement and steel to build the housing and the roads becomes the most important driver for climate change, not just industrialization or manufacturing. If you see the emissions in the West, most emissions come from transport. It is followed by buildings, and it is followed by waste of food in cities. So the lifestyle of the individual becomes very critical. The third thing is that what Prime Minister has picked up is that it is a recurring issue. As more and more people will shift to cities, as wealth increases, their emissions, their consumption will increase. So in future, the trend will be of increasing emissions. You build a factory, the emissions remain steady for that factory. But when you shift to cities and increase in incomes, it keeps increasing. The fourth point the Prime Minister has made is that we should see ourselves as trustee of the environment. It is not that looking at the world in terms of geopolitical groupings or friends and foes. We are looking at people. When you look at people, you look at society, you look at community, you look at individual, you can bring the world together around this theme. Because this theme is not special to India or to any other country. It is universal. And that comes to the last point, that this is part of civilizational value. Throughout civilization, we have reused, recycled, and reduced our emissions. If you look at our history, we conserved water. The entire Bundelkhand, Telangana area, were rainfall deficient. Monsoon was not that important there as in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Water conservation was a part of society, was a part of politics, was a part of the temples and the forts. Similarly, forest conservation was taking place. It was not exploitation of forest for local use, which meant regeneration of forest. So in this manner, what the Prime Minister has really said is, let us look at a global problem in a different light, not in terms of a country's interests, but in terms of societal interests, and see if we can bring the world together around this theme. And I think that is the indication that a lot of heads of state of a number of other countries, including the United Nations Secretary General, has appreciated this move. They have already appreciated this move for a global mission. And as time goes by, I think more and more countries in the world and people in societies in the world will see the significance that let us not look for somebody else for the solution. Let us first see what we can do.
Absolutely. Mr. Sanwal, you have rightly pointed out the Prime Minister has launched this mission to take climate change from a policy room to the common man's life, because eventually we are the one who are contributing to the carbon emission. And if just 1 billion individuals out of the global population of 8 billion take up environment-friendly behaviors in their daily lives, the global carbon emission levels could go down by approximately 20%. So this Lifestyle for Environment Life campaign, which has been launched by Prime Minister Modi at the last COP26 meeting in Glasgow in 2021, and the Prime Minister has rightly called upon global leaders to join the movement for safeguarding the environment by adopting environment-friendly lifestyle. Because what we have seen is so far in all the climate change talks, it is not translating into the common man's life. This is the first time such an initiative has been launched anywhere in the world. And no wonder many world leaders have congratulated Prime Minister on this initiative. In India specifically, we have also seen the government of India launching a lot of initiatives to transition to the green energy and also electrical vehicles and many such initiatives. How do you see those initiatives helping us in terms of day-to-day life?
See, there again, the Prime Minister gave a small number of very important examples. He said, look, people who are using ACs in cities, you usually keep it at 17 degrees centigrade. If you move up from 17 to say 21, 22, even more, you will save a lot of electricity without affecting the service provided. You don't have to be comfortable. You don't have to keep it at a very low temperature. He also said that people use the AC at night and then cover themselves with a blanket. People use the hot water geyser and then mix cold water in it to make it comfortable to have a bath. He talked about petrol consumption in a car. He says you are going to the hills. You use a car which gives you 5 kilometers a liter. You can use a car with less power because it will serve the purpose as well as any other car. And particularly he pointed out that you go to the gym for exercise and you take an SUV whose consumption is 5 kilometers a liter. It does not make sense. So what he is trying to appeal to the different levels of people, particularly the rich, that if you cut down without saying so, I think the important point is that Prime Minister has not said that I am targeting the rich, but he is in effect, the examples he gave were targeting the rich because it is the rich who use more than their fair share of carbon or material. The poor man, more in population, but their lifestyle is already sustainable. They do not waste. They do not have the money to waste. They live a simple lifestyle. So I think the messaging has been very important. And as this idea is developed, I think the other countries will get the message that as we grow rich, we have a certain level of responsibility. He has also said that India's per capita emissions are among the lowest, below the global average, and yet we want to take part in this movement because as we grow rich, we will contribute more to the global climate. So why don't we grow differently from now? The important point that I want to stress is that in each of these examples, the point the Prime Minister is making is that if you change your lifestyle, the level of service does not reduce. You will still have a car, but in the city, the car is fast. So go for a car that gives you greater mileage. Go for an electric vehicle. He's not saying don't use cars. He's saying go for fuel-efficient cars which serve the purpose for which you are buying a car, that is to get from one point to the other. The other point he has raised is that at the same time, the country, and that is an example for the other countries, we should shift from fossil fuels to solar energy, to ethanol, to hydrogen. The point he is making there is that just as the individual is important, the development and growth are also important. And he's not saying do not grow. He's saying grow differently. And lastly, he's bringing in the forests. He says, look, let us deal with nature in a more positive manner. Let us not treat forests as a resource to be exploited, but as a resource to be regenerated to help us in absorbing carbon dioxide and as part of our life. He has summed this up by saying pro-planet people. So linking people with planet.
Yes, absolutely. On that count, one thing which is very interesting about Prime Minister Modi is that he has taken the initiative for the green from very long time. India has launched Solar Alliance, and we are very proud to be one of the largest solar producers in the world. And I think with this Mission Life, probably it is expected to be an India-led global mass movement to ensure individual and collective action to protect and preserve the environment. When Prime Minister today said the vision of life is to adopt a lifestyle that is in sync with the planet and in no way cause any harm to it. And those who live in such a lifestyle can be referred as pro-planet people. So we will see worldwide this new campaign catching up how you can live in harmony with the nature without disturbing it, without making much of carbon emission. What will be the impact of this campaign in vulnerable countries which are climate change affected? There are many low-lying countries and island nations which are at the brunt of sinking. So this initiative, Do you think this will be caught up by many Western countries who contributes maximum carbon emissions?
Yes. The Western countries have already responded, Estonia, France, Britain, but they are being targeted by the Prime Minister in the sense of their lifestyle, cutting down waste, recycle, reuse. He's not saying don't use. He's saying reduce waste, recycle and reuse. Another important point is that the Prime Minister is also targeting areas like Africa when he is saying that why don't we stress millets? Next year should be the global year for millets in the world. United Nations has agreed to it because millets is essentially a dry land agriculture. Now, the Green Revolution came with wheat and rice, but they were water intensive, they were fertilizer intensive, they served a certain purpose at that time. Now a new revolution is needed for dry land agriculture, which is what most of the countries in Africa are involved with. Most of the areas in other countries too. Millets have always been an important part of our lives because they are drought resistant, they are more hardy, they are more nutritious. And he is giving the example of the International Yoga Day, which has been adopted worldwide and stressed by the United Nations, saying that, look, this involves the individual, it involves prevention, and it has to become part of our lives. And he has underlined this by saying that when the India and United Nations work together, they can achieve a lot. The essential message he's giving is that all of this together will go for a better world. With that kind of aim, it becomes inclusive. It becomes that everybody can participate at all levels, in all regions, in all countries, to think about these issues and at least come together with a talking point. Today, big countries are not talking to each other, so they need a talking point. They need an issue, which is a common concern for everybody. But that common concern has to be translated into the lifestyle, into the living conditions, into the situation in each of the countries. And this is what he has done. I think this is going to be a very important step, both for dealing with climate change and for India's position in the world.
Mr. Sanwal, Prime Minister, while launching Mission Life, also evoked India's tradition and culture of preserving and living with the nature. When he said reuse, reduce and recycling are part of India's tradition. So large part of Indian population who live in rural areas are still sort of doing very nature-friendly things. For the fuel, they use the cow dung, so many things which are doing on a day-to-day basis. So that is helping the environment a lot. And we being the most populous country, such initiatives overall is contributing a lot. Do you think some of our practices from the old time, some of our cultural practices, some of our traditions can also be incorporated and emulated by the world population?
See, there will be in two parts. One is that where technology comes in, we have to go for technology that is suitable like the LED bulbs. But where the individual is concerned, for example, in our daily lives, the amount of temperature we keep, the AC or water heating. Now that is where I think it is important that we look back at our ancient civilization. Remember that town planning in India has a history of thousands of years. So it is possible to cool a place by just air circulation in summer. This is what happens in the villages. People sit outside or they have cross ventilation. Now in modern design, because these designs emerged in temperate climates where the key issue was winter, where the key issue was darkness, rainfall. It was not the use of the wind or the nature to sustain life. They were more technology oriented. Now once this new thinking comes in, it is likely to extend to urban planning. It can extend to the way we spend our time together in the parks and other places. To look back at the ways we were living. Look at the Hawa Mahal in Jaipur, for example. The design was such that the natural breeze will cool it. So there were methods that had been adopted in our history culture where we use nature to benefit us. We did not want to conquer nature, live with nature. And I think some of those ideas will come back. Reducing waste. Food waste is a very important element. It has traditionally been part of Indian culture that you ate in the kitchen and you did not waste food. You took in your thali as much as you would eat, but you did not waste.
Certainly, Mr. Sanwal, our world today is in turmoil, facing multiple mutually reinforcing crises, even as we mount a fragile recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. War fuels devastating energy, food and cost of living crisis. So this lifestyle for environment, life mission, resonates with the global climate justice India has rightfully called for decades. Thank you so much for your time and participating in this discussion.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Mission Life, Lifestyle for Environment. The participants were Mukul Sanwal, environmentalist, and Sanjay Jha, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official.